By the end of this video, I'm going to see how hard it is to do every single thing in Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I'm Flapjack, and I'm on a journey to experience everything possible in the Kirby franchise. Yes, that means completing every single game. This is the story of how I completed my first of many. Well, what does it mean to do everything in Kirby and the Forgotten Land? In the pause menu, you can view your percentage of completion. The way this is calculated isn't straightforward, but it doesn't really matter all too much as long as we fulfilled these requirements. Take on all cups, complete every time trial, save every Waddle Dee, and collect every figure. I decided to take on all the cups first as that would best prepare me financially for the future. It's concerning that I'm more financially aware in Kirby than in real life, but that's besides the point. When completing this first task, I went in and challenged all 3 cups, including the most difficult of the 3, the Ultimate Cup Z. It's a boss rush that takes you through every boss that you fought in the game back to back to back. It even has some new bosses to take on, which are undoubtedly the hardest fights in the game. My first video on this channel is actually all about how I completed this challenge, so if you want to see how that went, feel free to check it out. I ended up finishing everything in an hour's time, which was actually a lot less time than I thought it would take. The next objective in my list also got its own video, completing every treasure road and its corresponding time trial. I would recommend watching those 2 videos first before wrapping up the Kirby and the Forgotten Land trilogy with the journey to 100% completion. That leaves us with 2 things left to do today, saving every Waddle Dee and collecting every figure. Collecting every figure does require me to have first saved every Waddle Dee, so I may as well begin with that. Of course, you save 3 Waddle Dees for completing a level, but many more are spread throughout. You can find them at the end of puzzle rooms, hidden around the level, or by completing a specific objective. Typically, I hate checklists when it comes to exploration. So many open world games give you a million collectibles to collect, but no reason to actually search them out. I don't mean this in the sense of the reward, rather in the sense of the design. Yes, you can hide things everywhere, but does that really encourage me to go over to it? No. This game, though, really made me want to explore. There are visual cues that tip you off to, hey, maybe I should go down this pathway. And while it isn't at all an essential part of beating the game, you feel rewarded for going out of your way. And since these levels are consistently dense, it feels just natural to explore. So I would do just that. Starting in the first world, I quickly grabbed every Waddle Dee I missed. As I had just mentioned, the game made me want to go out of my way to explore, so many of the Waddle Dees that were actually around the environment had already been picked up by me. Where the majority of my missing Waddle Dees came from was actually the hidden objectives. These also have you generally interacting with the levels themselves, but in smaller ways. For example, eat 4 donuts. Yeah, it isn't the most exhilarating of things considering the other challenges I've already taken on in this series, but here's a long list of random objectives I had to complete in these levels if you're at all curious. Over the next 3 hours, I'd slowly chip away at these objectives. There were only 3 levels that I had saved every Waddle Dee in on my first try, so I really got a lot of replay value on most levels this way. With all the main levels completed, there was only one thing left, the bosses. Even if there isn't much to explore in these boss levels, they have just as many Waddle Dees to save. How? Well, you have to beat the bosses in specific ways. Take Gorimondo for example. You have to slip through his legs, which is pretty easy. Defeat him with sword, which is also very easy. Defeating him within 2 minutes isn't too bad. But the next one is the real challenge. Clear the stage without taking any damage. Yeah. Every main boss in the game needs to be defeated without taking a single sliver of damage. I was able to take on every boss in the game back to back, but I had healing items and amiibo. I could basically tank every hit I ever wanted to, especially with a copy ability like Morphinite Sword, which has the ability to heal me as well. But now, I need to play perfectly. Bosses that would consistently land a hit on me like Silly Dillo were going to be a nightmare, but I had to persevere and take them all on. And take them on, I would. As Forgos Dreams was perfected, I let out a sigh of relief. After almost 5 hours of grinding for every Waddle Dee, the task was completed. All 300 Waddle Dees had been saved. As I received the notice that I saved every Waddle Dee in the final area, I returned to Waddle Dee Town to see the fruits of my labor. And to my surprise, it was actually very heartwarming. As thanks for restoring the town and saving all of its residents, a statue of both Elfilin and Kirby were erected to celebrate the hard work put in. I emoted on the statues and moved on because I knew the job was not finished. Now, from what you'd expect, I'd move on and go to collect every figure. but there was one collectible I was leaving out all this time, and that's the Forgos Dreams equivalent of Waddle Dees. Forgos Dreams is basically a hard mode of the levels that I had already journeyed through. So yes, at this point, I had already seen most of the basic level layouts 4 or 5 times over at this point. Thankfully, this is much shorter than the base game, and the collectible, Parts of Leon's Soul, is much more straightforward to obtain. Unlike Waddle Dees, there are no souls that require certain objectives to be completed. These are all found within the levels. There are just as many, however, with 300 to collect. I had already collected 281 on my first go through, so there weren't relatively many left to grab. I was a bit concerned though. With how densely packed with souls these levels tended to be, would it be possible that I'd have serious trouble finding them? I could easily miss something and then not know until the very end. Thankfully, this was remedied by Elflin, who actually tells Kirby how many souls are left in each area. So, I made sure to collect everything in an area before moving on to the next. With a clear goal ahead of me, I went to collect all 300 pieces of Leon's soul. After around 2 total hours of playing through Forgos Dreams, I had done it. All 300 pieces of Leon's soul had been collected, completely freeing our boy. For our troubles, we're given a figure of Leon and Carol, and I'm glad to see these characters both be back to normal. Now, finally, it was time to 100% this game. I had a ton of star coins, and I was ready to hit the deepest depths of Nintendo gacha hell in order to achieve my original goal. But first, I had some business around town. If you've been paying attention to the rest of the series, you've noticed that a lot of times Kirby gets rewarded with unique figures for completing specific tasks. While defeating the equivalent of a Dark Souls boss is definitely an achievement in itself, so is working a 9 to 5. Yes, there are figures for completing every minigame. Minigames like Help Wanted, which has Kirby serving Waddle Dees food during their lunch break. The Waddle Dees will let you know what they want, and Kirby has to serve the right dish to them. Mess it up, and they storm off to leave you a bad Yelp review. There were 3 difficulties, and completing the hardest one awarded me with a trophy alongside my paycheck. Before I took on any of the challenges in the series though, I had already received the figure for the fishing minigame as well, which has you pressing button commands as they appear on screen so that you can catch the biggest fish in the small pond. But minigames aren't the only thing in town. I headed over to the Waddle Dees, the local band, and helped them fundraise for their stage. After 2,000 star coins, they were given the best stage ever so they could rock on and play any song from the game as I please. They also gave me a figure for my charitable contributions. I then checked out a film at the theater, which allows Kirby to rewatch every cutscene in the game. As I had unlocked every cutscene for viewing, I was given a figure. I then went back to the cafe to dine in and receive another figure just for being a loyal customer. Just like that, only one special figure had remained, the true final boss of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Tilt and Roll Kirby. Yes, it was finally time to use the gyro capabilities in my controller. These bad boys aren't only good for feeling ice cubes, no, they can also roll a Kirby through a wooden maze. I have to roll a small Kirby from the start to a goal without falling off, by tilting my controller. Yes, that is all. It sounds easy, but oh my lord, this thing is brutal. There are 3 different board difficulties, and each one requires more and more precision. I received the final unique figure for my troubles, but doing so unleashed an even greater evil, extra hard difficulty. Now, there were not only a ton of Gordos roaming around the maze, but there were time trials as well. I knew I had to take this on. My final challenge. The first 2 only took a few tries, but I was not ready for the beast that would be the final level of Tilt and Roll Kirby. I don't know what it was, but my controller just felt off. I couldn't find the right angle to go straight across, and multiple times I choked, failing right at the very end. After over 10 minutes of attempts, I did it. I conquered every level of Tilt and Roll Kirby and beat every target time to boot. This time, I got 3 rare stones, which admittedly I didn't need, but I'll take what I can get. Now, there was only one thing left to do, and that was to spend all the star coins I had been collecting throughout my entire playthrough on figurines. The footage you see now is a sped up replay of me furiously pressing the A button as figures pop out on my screen. A lot of them come with really interesting tidbits of lore which give you some insight on the world you've been in for the longest time. Things like why it's called the Forgotten Land in the first place. Besides the lore, it's just really awesome to see various 3D models of things you encountered throughout this journey. I reflected on everything. From the excitement I felt when I watched the game get revealed with a group of my friends, the feeling when I first booted up the game, and the journey I've had learning how to edit and create videos so that I could share my love of this game with you. It's something I won't forget. With that said, the final crank was turned and Leon came out, a fitting end to the journey. As I backed away from the gacha machine, I was greeted with a screen congratulating me for achieving a 100% save file. Of course, I had to take a screenshot. So, there it is. After 3 videos and tons of hours of work put into this series, Kirby and the Forgotten Land was completed. There isn't a grand reward, just the congratulations screen, some special music, and a cool save file icon, but I'd argue that the reward was all in the journey. But my journey isn't done. This is just one Kirby game in a long series. This journey has just begun. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I greatly appreciate you. I put a lot of effort into these videos, and just you seeing this part of it makes it completely worth it. If you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more as I take on more games in this fashion. If you liked it, let me know not only by leaving a like on the video, but commenting as well. It makes my day seeing people comment on my videos. Once again, thank you for watching. Have a good one.